Hey, what's up, y'all? Matt here with Hatch and another episode of Built By. I hope you're doing fantastic today. We have a great episode on tap. I had a chance to connect with Jack Cookson, who's the director of growth over at BuildZoom. You're probably familiar with BuildZoom. They have a network of over 4 million contractors. They're kind of a lead aggregator in the sense that homeowners go to them to request a project, and then they connect homeowners with contractors. They're not a lead aggregator in the sense that they immediately get paid when they connect a homeowner and a contractor. They only get paid when that project starts. And the reason I wanted to have this conversation with them is exactly because of that, because they have a vested interest in connecting that homeowner with that contractor and making sure that project gets kicked off. They have a lot of educational materials on their website. This was a good chance for us to really connect and discuss, speed to lead and sales follow-up, which are two things that you've probably heard me harp on and on about that are so crucial right now. I do want to point out that in our discussion, and you'll hear about this a little bit later when we start talking about, what BuildZoom is seeing on their end, there's some leading indicators that things are starting to settle down and get back to normal. And we're going to discuss kind of the implications of what the Delta variant might have if there's more lockdowns on the way, what that's going to look like, some of the factors that Jack and BuildZoom believe go into this boom that we're having right now. We're also going to dive into some of the strategies that BuildZoom teaches their contractors when it comes to that follow-up. And at the end of the day, this was really just an awesome opportunity to connect with a business that's getting a ton of leads and can pull data and really see what's happening on the homeowner trend side. So with all that being said, I'm going to go ahead and kick this episode off. Again, this is Jack Cookson, who is the director of growth over at BuildZoom. I hope you enjoy.
This is a podcast for home improvement and home services marketing. This is Built By.
But you've got to be adaptable. You've got to find a way to accommodate an uncomfortable customer.
If you're not getting the home advisor leads in the first 5 minutes, you shouldn't even do it.
Hopefully we're eating their lunch while they're trying to get back up and running.
Jack, for listeners that don't know you or maybe aren't familiar with BuildZoom, I can't imagine there are many out there, but for the ones that aren't, could you give us kind of a high-level overview of your background in home improvement and also a little bit about your role at BuildZoom and what BuildZoom is?
Yeah, of course. I've been working at BuildZoom for about 6 years now, and that's been most of my extent in home improvement. We did a number of large remodels when I was growing up as a family, and my uncle is also was a general contractor for the longest time, and so I got to and he helped us build our home when we did those large remodels. So got to kind of have a firsthand look there. Was always pretty interested in that, and as well as interested in how we build and create space within cities or in the countryside and how those different things fit. I studied some architecture in school as a minor, and then have been at BuildZoom for 6 years. I kind of am responsible for everything on the non-technical side. So marketing. I also do a lot of business operations. I help design kind of how we engage with customers, understand what our products are, and now kind of run all of our growth, which is, getting homeowners and contractors connected, getting more of them, and that sort of thing. BuildZoom is for those that don't know, a platform that helps people through the pre-construction process. So I think, one of the main elements we do is help people find the right team for their project. So contractor, but also architect, et cetera. But then also what we help them do is kind of go through the right diligence process so that pairing sets off in the right place and is kind of set up for success throughout the project.
Yeah, so that's super interesting. How does BuildZoom, I guess, compare to, you hear about Home Advisor and all these other things? Is it more of a lead aggregator? But it sounds like you do a lot of stuff on the back end, right?
Yeah, so I think the primary difference is probably that, which is for Home Advisor and some of these other platforms, their job ends once a professional buys the lead. right? And so a professional says like they're willing to buy a lead and for X amount of dollars. And once home advisor sells that lead to them, they're out of the picture, and it's up to the contractor to make a connection, get hired, and like work on that job. BuildZoom is kind of fundamentally different, where we work with contractors and homeowners up until the point where the project is underway. So like once you're hired and contracts are signed, then we kind of slowly start to step out of the process at that point, which is very different, right? Like, and so to just give you a sense, like we sometimes partner with Home Advisor or other companies that are in the lead aggregation space to help them find contractors and actually make that match happen.
Gotcha.
And so we're kind of providing a different place. I think a big part of that is different incentives. So we only make money when contractors are getting jobs, not paying for a lead or anything like that. And so we have a huge incentive to make sure that they get hired. And that plays itself in a number of different ways. One, we help coordinate a ton because we want the contractor to get hired, and we know we can help them do that by coordinating with the homeowner. And then two, like we actually kick out, a little over 60% of the leads that come to us.
Really?
So we're curating these leads because we're making sure that the budget is somewhat aligned with the scope. We're making sure that the homeowner is serious and has financing or can pay for the job, and we're making sure that these projects actually happen, because our goal is to like only hand jobs that can happen to our contractors, so that way then they can just focus on like doing construction rather than chasing down leads.
Yeah, see, that's why I really wanted to have this conversation today, because it's fascinating what you guys are doing at BuildZoom, especially with that. Like when the lead comes in, you have skin in the game to actually make the connection with the homeowner and the contractor. And you guys have a ton of like advice. And I was reading through the website, which I'll make sure to link, but there's a ton of advice that I want to dig into a little bit later. But first off, I'm sure that some listeners probably think of BuildZoom as a lead aggregator, and they got their like garlic and holy water out, and everybody hates lead aggregators for that simple reason, right? They just give us the lead, we pay them, they're gone. Doesn't matter if it's good or bad, right? What do you think? Is that what the main pain point is? Is that where like most of the pain when contractors are dealing with these like name brand lead aggregators? Is that where the pain point is? Is that where the struggle is, I guess?
I think it's certainly a big pain point. I guess, one thing BuildZoom tries to do is we try to enable contractors to be great construction companies, not great sales companies, right? And I think great sales companies like benefit from things like more standard lead aggregators. Right? Like if they can dial in their sales, like that's awesome. But we want to enable the people that are like great contractors, and we want to take that work away from them, right? So that we can just like make sure that they do the construction side. And, that involves putting together a good bid and meeting with homeowners and all of that. It's not just the building part, but still like we want to remove that like sales element, and we want to help them kind of do that for them. And I, like you said, like skin in the game matters a ton. Right. And so like we are trying to align our incentives with not just giving contractors an opportunity, but instead like actually having them get work.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. And that's awesome. So one interesting thing is that you're on both sides. So you're talking to homeowners because they come to your website basically to request a project, and you're also coordinating with contractors on the backside. So I'm sure you guys have some pretty cool data around homeowners, what they're searching for. Is there anything that you've seen maybe that has stuck out to you that's an interesting data point or trend when homeowners are coming to BuildZoom?
Yeah, I think there's a number of things on the homeowner side. I mean, the last year or so has been a kind of a wild time in the construction industry. There's been these crazy booms, and there was an immediate bust very early in the COVID kind of era, and then this really long sustained boom that we're actually seeing taper off like a little bit.
Really?
Yeah. So BuildZoom has the benefit of, we've collected the largest database of building permits in the country. So we actually get to see like construction activity in a way that almost no one else does through these building permits. And so through building permits, we've seen a small tapering off start to occur at the end of March and kind of early April. And it's not precipitous drop, right? Like it's relatively flat. It's more of a flattening than anything. But we did see this boom start to kind of like flatten. Whereas, from call it April last year till, April this year, it was just like cranking upwards. I think. And so we're starting to see a little bit of a drop off. A part of what we think there is as the world starts to open back up again, right? People all of a sudden stop thinking about the home they're living in every day and start to think about, oh, maybe I can go on vacation with my family now, or, stuff like that. So I think it's really just like where people's headspace is at and how that's kind of maybe transitioned a little bit to lead to this like semi leveling off of this boom we're seeing.
Yeah. So you mentioned, comparing this data to last year. Was there this as we go into like the slow season, I guess, for remodeling, the winter months? So this wasn't something that you saw last year going into the winter season.
I mean, the winter is always lower than the summer, right? Like I think when we think about growth, right, we really think about like year over year growth, right? So like how does December compare to last December, right? Because it would be unfair to compare August to December. Right. Like that's just the nature of the construction industry, especially with starts. And so when I say like, an upward trajectory, I'm comparing like, last year to 2 years ago, et cetera, and this year to last year.
Yeah, gotcha. So, there's a lot of conversations about, potentially, lockdowns happening again, with the Delta variant and everything. Is this something that you see potentially like lifting the tide back up with remodeling projects? And I know this is totally kind of shooting off the hip here, and I'm sure you don't have much data around this, but I guess like gut feeling, is it the lockdowns that contribute to such a boom? And like you mentioned with families not being able to go on vacation, things like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have a number of different factors that are in play. One, people are spending a lot more time at home, right? With a lockdown, people are spending more time at home. And so you see that you notice the problems in your home, right? Like while you're there. And so you might want to fix it, or the needs in your home change, right? Like if you're working from home or your children are home, you might need to remodel a space to create the ability to like live in it with the new world where we're currently living in. So I think like the more lockdowns like do lead to that sort of thing. Another thing you're seeing people move into other homes, right? Like a lot of people are moving outside of cities. There's big trends there. Like the housing market in general is kind of going crazy. And we know that disproportionately more remodels happen in the first year after buying a home, like by a lot. So people are way more likely to remodel a home right after they've purchased a new one. So that home purchase is also going to drive more and more remodels, as well as, obviously people are moving into new homes will get built as well. So new home starts also will be impacted by that. And then I think the third thing is on the note of the vacation thing, right? Like their mental space is no longer taken up with other things, but also their discretionary spending is not going out, it's not being spent on the things it used to be spent on, right? Like and you've seen this across the industry where people are no longer like going out to restaurants and bars or on vacation. They're, ordering more from Amazon. They're spending more on their home, right? Things like this. So spending habits have changed. And I think, don't know how that will play out, but more lockdowns will certainly like impact those elements.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And in case things do like turn out pretty well, it comes down to there's a lot of companies right now that I'm talking to right now that I guess it's split between two. There's one half that are really throwing everything into what they're doing right now when it comes to connecting with homeowners. And I think I was having a conversation with someone the other day that said, if you're in home improvement right now, you're making money. Like it's the easiest time ever to make money. But on the other side of that are companies that are actually pulling back a little bit and really refining those like processes. So the sales process, they're using this as kind of a learning experience, which I think is pretty fascinating because in my mind, the ones that are actually using this time to kind of refine those processes are going to come out on the other side when things do get back to normal after, this just jumble of things happening. And when things do eventually get back to normal, I think they're going to come out kind of on top. And I wanted to get your opinion on, just a few things when it comes to that contractor side. So those processes, those fundamentals that a lot of people are putting in place right now. Are there any elements that you see working with contractors that separate them from the rest of the crowd when it comes to following up those leads, for instance, or building those relationships with homeowners?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a ton of things. I think first and foremost, when you think about funnels, in terms of like sales funnels or lead funnels, the bigger the funnel and the longer the funnel, and so the more steps in a funnel and the longer the time period in a funnel, the more room there is for optimization. And these are relatively big, these are relatively large funnels with a lot of steps, right? Like everything from getting a homeowner on the phone for the first time to getting a bid back and having a contract signed, right? Like that can take many months. There's also many steps in terms of, meeting them on site, working with a potential architect to review plans, things like that. So there's all these steps along the way, which just means there's tons of room for optimization. And so one thing BuildZoom tries to do is really help companies manage that process so that they can be more optimized. One, by doing some of it for them. Two, by enabling them to do it better for themselves, right? And giving them the data they need to do that. So for an example, really small kind of tidbit is we know that if you call a lead within 10 minutes of it coming in, you are 2 times more likely to get them on the phone. Like
Wow, yeah.
double, which is really, really cool. We're seeing that the people that get bids back quickly do really well. And also the people that reach out well. Scheduling walkthroughs is always a thing. So the shorter you can make that timeline, the more success you'll have. And we're also seeing that the more you can just make sure you move to the next step, the better you'll have success. So obviously the quality of the bid matters a ton. Having it broken down and itemized matters a ton. You'd be surprised how much variance there is for bids on the same project. They come in looking all over and like very different, but we're constantly learning kind of what works and trying to share that information with our contractors and build tools so that they can accomplish those things faster and easier so that they don't have to spend all their time and energy on it, but can instead just accomplish those things without much time and effort.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And that's really the two things that we hit on so much with our content too, is that speed to lead and that sales follow-up and making sure you get that bid to them on time, after the appointments run. And, going along with that 10-minute stat, we saw something from MIT Sloan this past year that was like, if you get to a lead within 5 minutes of them coming in, it's a 900% increase in your likelihood of connecting with that lead.
Sure.
Which is like, it's insane, the importance of speed there. So kind of, reversing, I guess, what would you say is like the number one misconception or mistake that companies make when it comes to following up with leads?
I think one thing that we see is that a lot of people aren't really, the biggest mistake is probably different than the biggest misconception. The biggest mistake is probably just like drop off and non-responsiveness, right? Like I think a lot of people, aren't very good at following up to make sure that they schedule a walkthrough and that a calendar invite is sent and all these things that, really need to be done to like make sure that everyone shows up when they're supposed to show up and meets when they're supposed to meet at a timely manner. But I think the probably biggest misconception is that that you can't bid on a project if it's not fully spec'd out. I think we've seen people have really good success with like a preliminary bid. So the example is, you go to a walkthrough and you are like, talk to the homeowner, you're interested in the project, they're interested in you. You're like, great, what's the next step? And a lot of times there's this limbo period where it's like, okay, well, we can't really bid on it until the plans are done. Or, we can't give you a hard numbers until the plans are done. And so I think that being able to communicate, hey, look, we're going to get you a preliminary bid. This will change a lot once we get finalized plans. And like, this is not the number we're going to bid on, but we want to keep you in communication and keep working with you and give you that kind of like preliminary bid, which sets you up to bid further down the road a little bit easier. But that we found that a lot of people like say they can't bid until everything is finalized, which obviously you can't tie yourself to numbers and expectations until that's true. But I think with clear communication, preliminary bids seem to be very successful. And that's maybe something that's kind of a misconception.
That's super interesting. And I know that you guys are super upfront when it comes to, pricing. And I know you have like a cost calculator I was messing around with on your website, which is pretty interesting. And when it comes to that bid and submitting something to the homeowner, how do you go about it? Like, do you go in like super low with the expectation that the job is going to be, a lot higher, or do you go high and then with the expectation of it being lower? What do you have any like suggestions around that?
Yeah, I think that the big thing there is show a range, right? Like, you don't need to show an exact number. I think a lot of people will like, but the showing a range is really helpful. And then if they get pegged to the bottom range, which is true, right? Like, then what you need to do is say, like, you need to make a lot of decisions to get you to that bottom part of the range, right? Mm-hmm. Like, it's not what I bid at the end of the day. It's the decisions you make in design that help you get to that bottom part. And I'm happy to do value engineering to help you get there. I think another thing that BuildZoom does with homeowners is we do something we call bid leveling. And so what we do is we take all bids, so that could be a preliminary bid or a fully flushed out bid, and we do some of this preliminary bidding for contractors so that they're not as pegged to the number, first of all. But we take all bids and we put them in the exact same format and compare numbers, make sure nothing's missing, make sure all the scope is included in the bid and no scope is extra in the bid, and compare numbers across a few different bids for homeowners. And so what this does is this pulls out any sort of ambiguity, right? Like, a homeowner can be like, oh, the kitchen of the home is the same for this contractor and this contractor, but the roofing part is much more expensive for this contractor. Or, electrical is, depending on how we break down the bid, right? Electrical is more expensive than site work for this contractor, et cetera. And also, if we see big gaps, we can go talk to the contractor and say, hey, are you missing this part, right? To avoid change orders down the road. And I think like we get to play kind of like bad guy, so to speak, for the contractors and help the homeowner just like really understand that bid and make sure they know, like, hey, sometimes the bid that's a lower price, like, is missing stuff. And we actually can show you where it's missing stuff. And like, then the contractor with a bid that's higher that would normally get discarded, but it's not missing stuff, like, shines through because the stuff that's not missing is highlighted.
That's so fascinating, man. I never even thought of that, having that like middleman or that middle layer there to like really act as the bad guy, you said. And like, it's a dynamic you don't really think of until you see it in action with homeowners, and it allows home improvement companies really to take that consultative approach to swoop in, and they don't become the numbers gangster, I guess.
Yeah, and we get to be this kind of like trusted middle party, right? Like, where in theory, if you hear something from, a contractor as a homeowner, you might think they're trying to like sell you and on themselves, which is totally fair and as they kind of should, right? But it's, if we're in the middle, it is more arbitrary, and so therefore we're able to give a more like kind of like neutral take, and homeowners really trust that, which also makes the contractors that are the best shine through, right? And the contractors that are giving the best bids and have the best experience, et cetera.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. And it's really cool to hear that. When it comes to like lead follow up and giving the bid within 2 weeks and all these things, are there any like tools or technology that would make this like process easier, or even just like from a high level, like what do you suggest on the like something that they could add to their business, within the next week that you think is super powerful?
Oh yeah, that's really interesting. So BuildZoom long term is trying to build all of these tools, right? We're trying to build tooling to make bidding easier, and we're making good progress there. So contractors don't have to spend as much time bidding. They can kind of just use our bids and templates to, one, highlight themselves really well, but two, make bidding a little bit easier and more accurate. We're also trying to build tooling to hone in on a price, right? Like we talked about this idea of, being worried about giving the wrong price early, whereas instead we view this as like, look, your price starts out at this range, and we're going to hone in and like kind of aim for your target here. And if we start to go a little high, we're going to make decisions to go a little bit lower, right? And vice versa. So we're building a lot of this tooling to really help manage expectations and push people through the process with scheduling and, making sure timelines are accurately kind of outlined and all the steps of the process are outlined. But in terms of tooling, I think, some really simple ones that people can do is like, I think Calendly is a great resource, right? Like even just making sure that you're setting up time to get a walkthrough in, and you don't have to spend all this time negotiating calendar times with a homeowner, and you can just send them a Calendly link to schedule time on your calendar. I think that's a huge thing. I think like Team Gantt for project management is really good for helping them understand like, hey, here are the 10 major steps we need to get through in order to hire. You can use like, this is the timeline we expect for each of those steps to take. Let's get through it together. So I think those are some two that come to mind. In general, I also think, Zoom is a good one, right? Like people have really quickly adapted to video calls. And if you can do a video call to meet somebody or to review the bid, going to be much more effective than if you, do it over the phone or just email it to them. And so I think like thinking about some of those tools are also really helpful. And those are ones they can, one, use BuildZoom, but two, they can implement those tomorrow, right? Super easy to get going and move things forward.
Yeah, it's the Calendly suggestion is super interesting, because I've actually seen a lot of companies start implementing that as their like contact us form, basically, where the first touch is that the homeowner gets to pick the day and the time that the contractor shows up, right? And it removes the problem of the form fill in the front that everybody sees, and it makes it more. It puts the homeowner in charge of the decision, and it gives them that just extra layer of trust from the beginning, which is so crucial in building that relationship and getting that bid, accepted. Jack, this has been awesome, man. I got a few more questions for you, and I want to talk a little bit about really what you're preaching when it comes to the follow-up methodology on BuildZoom's end, because like you said, like you don't get paid until the bid is completed, right? And it's when the job started, and so you have kind of a reason to help contractors get with those homeowners. And I would love to learn a little bit about kind of your science behind that. And when it comes to, when I was looking through your website, there's really 3 parts that you really hone in on, which is 1, messaging, 2, proposals, and 3, reviews. So after the project's completed. When it comes to that, like messaging and that first initial contact, what do you coach your contractors to really hone in on and talk about in those crucial first moments of connecting?
Yeah, so I think it's maybe important for me to explain a little bit about how BuildZoom's process works, which is when we connect a contractor, we most of the time do what is called a showcase. And so what we'll do is we'll have a phone call with the homeowner, and we'll actually walk them through the contractor. So, we'll say, hey, we want to recommend Jim's Construction. Jim has been in business for 20 years. He mostly does residential remodels. He does between 5 and 10 a year. Currently, he has 3 on his plate. His crew is, 15 people, and they sub out certain work, but most work is done in-house. And and then we say, here's, you're doing a kitchen in San Jose. Here are 2 kitchen remodel projects he's done, and one of them is, you're on your block in San Jose, right? And so we'll like kind of showcase them and be like, this is the contractor, and here's why we think they're good. Not only a good contractor, but also a good fit for your project. And so we're really trying to kind of like set them up for success, right? Like, and then from there, I think in terms of messaging, right, I think the most important part is, one, to be responsive, right? So, we talk to many homeowners, and one of the things they just appreciate the most is just having somebody get back to them quickly. I think that's like the most important thing. Even if that answer is, hey, this will take me a couple days to figure out, let me get back to you at this time. That's like a totally acceptable message, but making sure you respond is super important. And then I think 3 is being very clear with setting the right expectations and meeting those expectations. I think those are kind of the things with messaging that really matter. And then continuing to move it through the process, right? So always setting a next step and then hitting that next step, right? Like never leave a conversation without some like follow-up action scheduled or something like that.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I love that. Like always keeping them like prepared for the next step. That's really cool, man. And honing in on, we've talked about it a little bit, but the bid, and I think this is a thing that a lot of contractors look over. And there's a great tool out there, Engage. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them, but great SaaS tool. They're one of our partners, and they kind of really mastered the art of the proposal and the bid. And it's like setting up like Adobe or whatever. But the reason that they're seeing success, in my opinion, and I've had jobs done in my house where we've gotten siding before, and they just write a number on an envelope and like slide it across the table. And it's crazy. You can set your company apart so well by actually, focusing on creating a proposal that's worth giving to a homeowner. Is this something that you see? I saw something, an article that you guys had written that was, about creating a really nice proposal.
Yeah. I mean, really nice proposal is super helpful, right? And a really nice proposal has, we think, a number of different characteristics. Like one, it's very itemized, right? And costs are very clearly delineated across, labor and materials, but also the different types of work, right? So, commercial projects and large scale projects do this very well, right? And so like, I think like just more adoption in the residential world and for smaller projects makes a lot of sense. And so breaking down bids in a really itemized fashion. 2, giving a really clear description as to what is in this bid versus what is not, right? Like, I think that's where a lot of things go wrong, where people don't know. They're like, oh, I thought that was included, right? And it's like very clearly not, or, vice versa, right? And so you should make sure that is really good. And then we also think that there's some element to a proposal that is not just a bid, right? Like there's an element to a proposal where you should show some past work, like your portfolio. You should show, maybe some customer references. You should like give some information about like, hey, look, like this is what I'm doing for your project, but this is a little bit about me and why you can trust me, right? Because to some extent, you're putting your trust in a person and in a company, and you want some more validation as to why you should do that. Because stuff's not going to go completely according to plan, right? Yeah. And so you need to have that faith that the contractor is somebody that can kind of roll with the punches and be somebody that you can trust through that process. And so I think showing that through reviews, testimonials, past projects, a portfolio, where you've worked, years of experience, there's a number of different ways to do it. But I think also showing some of that in your proposal is helpful.
Yeah, it seems like the easiest way to get the upper hand on the competition right now, especially with people just throwing numbers out left and right.
Totally.
Putting a little bit of effort into it, it means all the world, especially for homeowners where you're probably going to be in their house for like multiple days, and they'd like to get that trust level up. But
Jack, I think there's tools, right? Like, I mean, BuildZoom's proposal tool is one where sure, there's a little bit of a cost to create the first proposal, but then to create your second, third, fourth, fifth is so easy, right? It's almost becomes easier, and you get all the benefit of it looking way better and being way better. So I think there's lots of tools.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. And again, one of our partners, Engage, they're fantastic at that, and they do a really good job of that too. So, Jack, one last question I like to ask every guest, and I know we're running against time here, so I wanted to make sure we got this one in, but it's vague on purpose, just because the answers that come out are better, I think, when it's super vague.
Cool.
But what's the number one piece of advice you would give to anyone in home improvement right now?
Yeah, so I'm going to give a little bit of advice around like setting up projects for success. So this isn't really for like a business going into the home improvement space. This is really for how to set a project up for success. And we at BuildZoom are huge fans of the Abraham Lincoln saying, which is, if you give me 6 hours to cut down a tree, I'll spend the first 4 sharpening the axe. And so our thought is like, take time to do a really good job at the beginning, setting expectations, having a thorough bid, managing a contract to know exactly what's in it and what's not, and outlining all that stuff with the homeowner. Take a quick pause to outline how the project's going to go. Make sure your ducks are in a row before you start. And then we find that really sets up projects for success throughout the time of the project, right? Like there's just less errors, more kind of alignment between the homeowner and the contractor. Yeah,
absolutely. That's awesome. And that is so important. And this has been a great episode, and I really appreciate you coming on, Jack.
Thanks.
I'm going to give you just a few minutes here at the end. If listeners want to learn more about BuildZoom, or if they want to learn more about you, where should they go?
Yeah, I mean, check out BuildZoom online at buildzoom.com. Very, very easy. You can also find us on LinkedIn as well as Facebook. Probably the best places to see us. For myself, similar. I have a LinkedIn that you can check out. Also, you can check out my Twitter, which is What's Cookson. Hopefully we'll have more of these conversations. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. This has, again, been a great conversation, and Jack will definitely have to do it again in the future.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Matt.